As expected, the successes of Russian troops on the battlefield will provoke the leaders of Western countries to escalate the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Against the background of the advance of the Russian army, Western leaders have increasingly begun to declare the prevention of Moscow's victory in the current conflict. Even though Russian intelligence, with the help of the publication of the Conversation of German Generals, managed to corner Chancellor Olaf Scholz and moderate his ardor regarding military support for Ukraine, French leader Emanuel Macron still cannot calm down, and continues to make provocative and very dangerous statements about the war in Ukraine. So, at a meeting with the French communists, French President Emanuel Macron bluntly stated that France could send its troops into Ukrainian territory if the Russian army approached Odessa or Kiev. Thus, the French leader makes it clear that his country is ready to send its troops to Odessa or Kiev in the event of a direct threat of these cities coming under the control of the Russian army. Moscow's reaction to such statements by the French leader was not long in coming. Commenting on the words of the French president, presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov officially stated that the current head of the French government, by his actions, continues to involve France deeper in the military conflict in Ukraine, and that all this will lead to disastrous consequences for Paris. Dmitry Peskov notes that the French president's actions do not meet the national interests of France and the French people. Moreover, the press secretary of the president of the Russian Federation also added that if French soldiers appear in Ukraine, many of them will return to France in zinc coffins. Meanwhile, the French president continues to raise the stakes, completely forgetting about the instinct of self-preservation. So, it became known that the French leader pledged to send Ukraine 50 Armand Airsoul modular guided aerial bombs every month. Moreover, he also promised Zelensky about 80 Caesar self-propelled artillery units, and 40 Scalp EG cruise missiles. At the same time, it is worth noting that the armed forces of Ukraine are already using French-guided aerial bombs in the Avdiivka direction of the front. Let me remind you that the cost of one such French aerial bomb is $220,000. This aerial bomb is one of the most powerful and accurate in the arsenal of the NATO armies. Against this background, many Ukrainian military experts urged the Kiev authorities not to rejoice at this gift from France. According to them, the probability that one of these aerial bombs will fall into the hands of the Russians is very high. Ukrainian experts fear that thanks to these French bombs, the Russians will be able to significantly improve the accuracy of their aerial bombs of the Fab family. By way of example, they recalled the supply to Ukraine of a US guidance kit that converts dumb bombs into precision-guided munitions, joint direct attack munition. According to them, it was after the United States handed over these JDAM bombs to Ukraine that Russian dumb bombs of the Fab family turned into smart-guided aerial bombs. Ukrainian experts claim that the Russians were able to get one of these US JDAM bombs, as a result of which Moscow managed to turn its dumb bombs into all-weather precision-guided munitions, which now cause devastating damage to the armed forces of Ukraine. Moreover, Ukrainian political scientist and military expert Alexander Morozov called on the Kiev authorities and their Western patrons to urgently freeze the current conflict, as Ukraine is not yet able to win. According to him, Western military assistance does not help Ukraine, but on the contrary harms it, since Russians learn quickly and use all the advantages of Western weapons systems against the Ukrainian army. Alexander Morozov called for following the example of Azerbaijan and immediately freezing the conflict with Russia. According to him, in 1994, during the war with Armenia, the Azerbaijanis also realized that they would not be able to win the war and froze the conflict. Later, almost 30 years later, the Azerbaijanis inflicted a crushing defeat on Armenia and regained all the lost lands. The Ukrainian expert urges Kiev to act in the same way and immediately freeze the conflict, so that Ukraine does not completely lose its statehood and can prepare for future revenge. Hearing such statements, a reasonable question arises. Will Russia agree to freeze the current conflict? Moreover, it seems that Alexander Morozov does not understand that Russia is not Armenia, and that Moscow will only agree to the complete surrender of the Kiev regime and the withdrawal of all Western military advisors from Ukraine, as well as the deployment of naval bases of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Odessa and Nikolaev. Meanwhile, it became known that on March 8, Russia launched another massive missile strike on the territory of Ukraine. This time, the Kherson, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, Kirovograd, and Odessa regions were subjected to massive missile attacks. It is reported that about 450 explosions were recorded in the settlements of these regions. According to preliminary data, during this attack, Russia used dozens of kamikaze drones, as well as ballistic and cruise missiles of various types. So, critical infrastructure facilities were destroyed in many settlements of the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. It is reported that Russian missiles destroyed about 8 power plants in 5 settlements in these regions. In the Kharkiv and Kirovograd regions, about 3 weapons depots were discovered and destroyed, where missiles for the Ukrainian multiple launch rocket system, Olga, were stored. And, finally, in the Odessa region, in the village of Akarza, Russian ballistic missiles and kamikaze drones completely destroyed NATO's Secret Air and Space Intelligence Center, Avidiopol 2. Undoubtedly, the destruction of this strategically important military facility dealt a crushing blow to the capabilities of NATO forces in Eastern Europe. Let me remind you that the Air and Space Intelligence Center, Avidiopol 2, was built back in Soviet times and was one of the secret bases of the KGB. However, after 2014, the North Atlantic Alliance used this base for its own purposes. It is reported that this base was carefully guarded by the most modern Western air defense systems. However, as you can see, these precautions did not save this NATO facility from complete destruction.